That's Nixon for you. That he would do that. Instead of saying, I'm taking a principled stand and I'm going to tell the American people this is what we have to do, instead of that, he says, we're all together on this, right? Because they're not going to like us. By the laborious process by which he often gained consensus, Nixon orchestrated numerous long briefings, each time introducing a new advisor to the plan and virtually forcing that person to defer to the unanimous wisdom of his colleagues. So he brings them in one at a time and browbeats them until they all agree. One great flaw of such a process was that he brooked no opposition, right? He wouldn't hear a no answer to it, permitting no devil's advocate. So here we have somebody who's standing up saying, we've got to do this right. This is the only answer. We've got to go into Laos. We've got to, if we're fighting this war, then this is what we have to do to win, to help us win. In this case, win means to pull out easier and with less casualties. So here's someone who's trying to do what's right, and in order to do what's right, what seems to be the best thing, he's basically got to browbeat a lot of people, and then they oppose him still behind the scenes because they've been browbeaten in public one after another. So the whole package had to be accepted in total. Now, so all of Nixon's plans, he didn't allow it to be which part's good, which part's bad, who's on board for what, how should we do this. He said, no, this is something we're doing, and instead of convincing people reasonably, he convinced people using social pressure, because Nixon was a very empty second-hander. And another flaw was that it took a lot of time, but he had time. Between the beginning of Nixon's persuasive efforts in mid-December 1970 and the moment of final decision in January of 1971, valuable planning time was lost for the South Vietnamese military, who were to organize the largest, most complicated and important operation of the war. Okay? Very serious operation to be undertaken by green South Vietnamese troops. Valuable planning time and preparation time was lost so that Nixon could browbeat people instead of using a more morally upstanding way of convincing them of the necessity of the operation. Okay, so problems of planning. We skip a few pages here. From concept to execution. The plan for Lam Son 719 had taken shape in just a few weeks and in tight security. Because communist espionage cells were active within the South Vietnamese Army, the Joint Planning Committee had a strictly limited membership. And it says, segue into the middle of a sentence, there's no way to segue in, but less than a week before the February 8th go day, in the end, secrecy was breached on all sides. Okay. According to one CIA source, Vietnamese communists had infiltrated the translating and printing shops at I Corps headquarters and filched copies of the plans, probably including sites of proposed helicopter landing zones and fire bases. Now get this, they are having trouble keeping the facts from the enemy. They are having trouble keeping everything secret. MACV briefed American reporters off the record on the impending action, but then, to enhance security, imposed a rare press embargo on the reporting of troop movements. The embargo, Henry Kissinger wrote later, proved to be a naive mistake. So if you say you can't report anything about troop movements, well, on the one hand, that's a bit odd, isn't it? Because why is the press unable to report troop movements? Why are they unable to talk about it? So the very absence of the information is suspicious. That's what Henry Kissinger said. It proved to be a naive mistake. Communists and other news sources not bound by the embargo published reports of the incursion into Laos, and the very word of the embargo when it reached Washington tipped off news editors that something of that nature was in the offing. So The communist agencies reported the incursion, even though the capitalist free Western reporters weren't allowed to. So we got news of it anyway, which may have been, by a lot of people, just put off as communist propaganda at the beginning. The result was that even before the embargo was lifted, word of the impending operation was on the front pages of newspapers in the States, and their editorial pages were cautioning against the expedition. The military didn't even have time to go on this extremely secret operation, even though the press embargo and censorship's been put in place. Alright, the plans for Lam Son 719 were kept closely held for so long that the units involved had too little time for tactical planning and preparation. This was particularly important because many of the units, principally the airborne troops and the Marines, had worked only as separate battalions and brigades and had no experience of maneuvering together or cooperating in adjoining areas. They could have used some more, they could have used an extra month or more, let's say. Commanders and upper-level staff members were unaccustomed to working in concert. Except at the highest levels, the U.S. and the ARVN staffs did not work together in coordinating plans for the operation. Only the very, very upper brass worked together. Everybody else, the ARVN and the American military, were separate. Now, on the one hand, that's good because that means they had their own military and their own structure and their own thing going. On the other hand, they didn't have Americans involved, and there wasn't an integration of the plans. Quote, planning was rushed, handicapped by security restrictions, and conducted separately and in isolation by Vietnamese and Americans, concluded Brigadier General Sidney B. Berry, Assistant Commander of the 101st Airborne, who took charge of helicopter support. He continues, planning and coordination for Lam Son 719 were, at the Corps Commander's level, unacceptably low quality. Okay. Maybe that's part of the reason for what went wrong. We skip a little ways. Despite signs of inadequate preparation, in late January and early February, as the planning for Lam Son 719 progressed, the U.S. and South Vietnamese commanders and staffs waxed confident. They all started saying, this is going to be great, it's going to go over well, this is going to work. Following a briefing at 24th Corps headquarters, Colonel Arthur W. Pence, senior advisor, summarized the planners' mood. Here's how the planners feel. It was apparent at this time that the United States intelligence felt that the operation would be lightly opposed and that a 2-day preparation of the area prior to D-Day by tactical air would effectively neutralize the enemy anti-aircraft capability, although the enemy was credited with having 170 to 200 anti-aircraft weapons of mixed caliber in the operational area. It's quite a few weapons. For 2 days they're going to do some bombing, and that's going to take care of all that. The tank threat was considered minimal, and the reinforcement capability was listed as 14 days for 2 divisions from north of the DMZ. They thought it was going to take 14 days for the north to resupply, to bring any extra troops forward, tanks and stuff. This intelligence outlook was quite inaccurate. As it turned out, the only correct prognosis proved to be about the reinforcements available to the North Vietnamese. They were right about that. Everything else they were wrong on. Poor weather over Laos on the 2 days prior to the beginning of Lam Son prevented preparatory airstrikes from being carried out, so the enemy's anti-aircraft weapons were never attacked. There was even an instance of friendly fire when he thought he saw enemy troops on the border, but they were our troops on the enemy's border, and dropped a cluster bomb, killing 6 and destroying an armored personnel carrier. Alright, page 76, we skip a bit, skip about 2-3 pages. A patrol from Ranger North inside of Laos. A patrol from Ranger North killed a reported 43 North Vietnamese and seized 2 37mm anti-aircraft artillery guns. In the southern sector, patrols from the 1st Division's fire bases not only ran into enemy soldiers, but they also found major enemy caches that held individual weapons and ammunition, as well as recoilless rifles, petroleum in 55-gallon drums,